So, why don't you tell me about where you were born and where you grew up?
I was born in Knoxville. I was born at Baptist Hospital in 1958, and I grew up in Sevier County. So I grew up between Pigeon Forge and Sevierville on a road, Middle Creek Road, which is now Veterans Boulevard. I grew up there. I have a brother and a sister. My family were dairy farmers, so we grew up on a farm. And I grew up, a trip to town was once a week, even then. And we grew and raised most of what we ate. So we bought clothes once a year, and that was at the beginning of school. And so I grew up, what I tell people is I grew up poor, but I did not grow up in poverty. So there's a little bit of a difference, I think. We didn't have a whole lot, but we had what we needed.
So what did you grew up on a farm, is what you said. Did you do farm work all through growing up? What did you do?
Yeah, from the time I was 9 years old, I had to get up before school. I got up at 5 or 6 o'clock every morning, and my job was I had to go across the creek, and then we had a barn that was about 200 yards from the house, and we had sheep and hogs and things like that in there, and I had to carry buckets of water from the creek up to the barn and fill all the water, probably 10 or 12 stalls of water for whatever we had in the barn. I had to feed all of them, and then I had to go to the dairy, which was on the other side of the house, and I had to feed the cows and get them in, and then by the time I got them all in, my dad milked, but by then it was about 7, and I would go to the house, go home, and change clothes, clean up, and catch the bus a little after 7. So I grew up my whole life. I only played sports a little because there was always work to be done on the farm, and so I never was able to really, play baseball or football or basketball like I wanted to. I did some, but my dad was always, well, if you had that much time, then we can find something for you to do. So I grew up working, and my brother and my sister did too. So that's all I knew growing up was, working on the farm.
I understand. So you said you lived on what is now Veterans Boulevard, right? So how has the growing up of Pigeon Forge in that area kind of affected you? How did it affect you growing up?
Well, I grew up when we considered ourselves way out in the country when I was little. When I was young, up into my 20s and early 30s, we were still considered out in the country. But now, the farm is not like it was then, because we have since sold quite a bit of it. And then Veterans Boulevard went through the middle of the farm, and so that caused us to have to pretty much quit farming, but Daddy was ready to retire anyway. But now Dream World Resort is next to the end of where our farm was. So
really, wow.
Yeah, so right where Dreammore starts, that's where our farm starts. And so it's, we used to consider ourselves way out from civilization, and our community growing up was centered around Middle Creek Methodist Church, and the only time I really saw any of my friends was on Wednesday nights and Sundays, and when everybody would come to church. And we rode bicycles all around, and what's now millions of people come by right by my mom and dad's house now. Back when I was growing up, we had dogs that laid in the road, Middle Creek Road, because the shade tree shaded the asphalt, and the asphalt would be cool where the shade was, and the dogs could lay there for 2 hours and not ever have to get up because a car was going by. So that's amazing how much that's changed.
It is a big change.
And I can remember when Pigeon Forge was a 2-lane highway, not necessarily a road. I mean, there's people that can remember when it was like a road, but I can remember when it was like 2-lane, kind of a highway with not many things on it. A couple of restaurants, the movie theater, the drive-in theater. There was no grocery store. The grocery stores were in Sevierville. You had Butler's store, the old mill. And that was pretty much it. Growing up, I don't remember, being a whole lot in Pigeon Forge at that time. And then when, the late 70s, early 80s, when Dolly came into play and all that in the, late 80s, early 90s, and that's when it took off. But now, I mean, it's totally different. Now, I mean, it's nothing like when I grew up. The creek that runs through our farm used to be full of fish. We could go down there and fish. Now there's nothing alive in Middle Creek anymore.
Due to pollution?
Yeah, and just runoff and stuff. I mean, you can't find anything alive in there anymore. We used to catch bass and catfish and stuff in there when I was a kid. You could go fish that and catch all kinds of fish. There's nothing alive in it anymore, and it's because of the pollution around it and the runoff and everything. Just the houses that are built up, the motels and stuff. That's it's changed the lay of the landscape so much. So
yeah. So you talked about your dogs laying in the middle of the road. Did you live close to relatives? From like your parents, did your grandparents live across the street, or did they actually live
my
further
grandparent?
out?
I only had one grandparent growing up. My dad's mom and dad died a couple of years before I was born. My grandfather on my mom's side died the year I was born, and then the only grandparent I knew was my mom's mom, which was my mom, and she was my babysitter, my brother's babysitter, my sister's babysitter, but she lived in Sevierville. So my mom was an RN, and so when she had to work, she would drop us off at my grandmother's house in Sevierville, and we would stay there. Mom worked 6 to 3, the shift at the emergency room most of her career, and so she would drop us off at 5:30 at my grandmother's in Sevierville, and my grandmother's since passed, but my grandmother's house used to be about where Hobby Lobby is there, going into Sevierville, right there.
So you couldn't walk to her?
No, no, it was back then it was 30-minute drive, which is a 10-minute drive now, but it was a 30-minute drive then. So
okay, cool. What was school like for you growing up?
I hated it. I literally couldn't stand it. I wasn't a good student growing up. I didn't mind school. I just didn't apply myself. I got out of high school as a C student, barely a C student. To be honest with you, Tori, I don't remember much about high school. I really do not.
That's okay.
It was, I spent most of my high school years working, and it was more about maintaining the farm and doing that. I will tell you this, I was heavily involved, which I think was very formational for me. I was heavily involved in 4-H.
Oh, okay.
And we showed cattle. I participated in public speaking contests and demonstration days and all that stuff. So I was heavily involved in 4-H. That was probably my only outside activity that my parents fully supported. I wanted to play sports, but that was not an option.
Because you could work on the farm instead.
Yeah. And being in 4-H, that was still working on the farm for my parents. So my dad fully supported that, and we showed cattle, Knoxville, Newport, all the way to Nashville and places. That was really the only time I ever got to travel outside of Sevier County, was when we would go to a 4-H event. So 4-H was that was the good thing about, I guess the thing I enjoyed the most about school was being able to do those things. But like I said, I wasn't the greatest student in the world.
And when you say you worked in high school, I'm assuming you meant on the
farm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So what about college? What was that like for you?
Well, I graduated high school in 1976, and I stayed out a year, and I wanted to go to college, but we couldn't afford college. And so my mom and dad, there wasn't any push to go to school. So I didn't have that encouragement to go. But I was ready. By the time I stayed home a year after high school, all my friends were going to college. I was like, I want to go to college. So I went to UT. I wasn't mature. I'd never been away from home like on my own. And so I lasted 2 semesters and flunked out. Came home and hated it. Hated living at home. Didn't know what I wanted to do. So I stayed out. Back then you could stay out for like a quarter or 2 quarters because they were on the quarter system then. And then you could apply and go back. And you only got one more shot. And so I waited. I applied. They let me back in. And they only give you 1 quarter then to make it. And I flunked out again. It was more than anything, I just wanted to get away from home. So like I said, I flunked out of UT twice. And that was in 77 and 79, I flunked out, or 78 going into 79, and flunked out twice. I mean, I might have 6 credit hours at UT out of 3 semesters, so it was pretty terrible. I didn't know how to study. I did not know, I didn't know how to manage money. I didn't know how to manage social life. I was all over the place, because I was pretty much, just my world consisted of a mile or 2 around my house and then to school. So,
right. So it was a big change.
Yeah, it was a big change, and it was hard. And I actually did try classes and stuff, but the pool of partying and new friends and being away from home was far more at that age. I was not, like I said, I wasn't mature. It was far greater pull for me than to really take school serious. So, yeah.
But that's not where the story ends.
No, I went back. I went back to school when I was 44. My father-in-law, I was working for the city of Pigeon Forge, and my father-in-law had a massive heart attack and passed away. And I was working for the city, and I had started taking one or 2 classes at Walter State, just the gen ed classes, that you have to take whenever you go back. And so I was taking English and speech and things like that, and I was just kind of just trying to figure out if I wanted to go back to college. And I was working at the city of Pigeon Forge, and I was the Parks and Recreation director, and got that job through friendships, not because I had an education, but it's because I worked hard and worked my way up and had that position. Well, then my father-in-law passed away, massive heart attack, and he had a cabin rental business. He had used car lot. He was very entrepreneurial, and so he had a lot of things going on, and he ran it himself, and he died at 63, and so they didn't have anybody to run the business. And so Robin's family asked me if I would quit my job at the city and come and work for them and manage their business, because that's what I did. Is I was a manager and people and of businesses. And so I quit the city of Pigeon Forge, which is a job that I loved. I loved that job, but I left for family, and I worked there for about 6 or 8 months. And a guy walked in one day and offered my mother-in-law, so much money for everything. He said, "I'll buy everything." And they sold it, and which was fine. That helped her out and everything, but it left me without a job. And so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And Robin said, she goes, if you want to go to school, she goes, now's the time to do it. Her career was going well, and we could live on her income at that time. And so I started taking as many classes as I could at Walter State. And then when I took as many as I could there, I transferred to Carson Newman. I was 45, 46 when I went to Carson Newman.
Did they make you go through the regular freshman orientation?
Yeah.
Like they do? Really?
I had to do everything. I had to do all that stuff. And my first class was the summer of '05, and I took Crutchley's Intro to New Testament. And then the next class I took that the first summer class, and then the second summer class I took Garner's Old Testament class. So I took my New Testament and Old Testament in the summer. But I'd already been going. It wasn't like I didn't know what college life was like. I was still a commuter. You know, I was just going a little farther than Walter State because I took most all my classes at Sevierville campus. I did have to go to Newport for a couple of classes, but I never went to Morristown. So when I transferred to Carson Newman, I was going there as I wanted to teach high school history. So I went there, and that's what I was going to do. And I was actually a bivocational pastor. Rob and I had started a church in '99, Pigeon Forge Community Church, which that's the picture on the wall, with the blue matting.
Oh.
That was the first ad that we ran in the paper.
Wow.
When we started the church. That was the very first ad that came out in the Mountain Press, and Robin one day framed it for me. But I was bivocational at that church. I had no formal training in the ministry. Just felt called to preach and be a pastor. Didn't have it, seminary. None of that was on my radar. The only reason I went to Carson Newman was because I didn't want to go to UT because I'd failed out twice, and I was
right.
So that's what. And I wound up over there. Of course, I met the first two people that I met was Dr. Brummett and Dr. Garner. And Brummett was my advisor the whole time I was there, and he and I became really good friends. And
because was he dean of graduate studies at the time?
Yeah. And so I went there, and I told who is over the education department? What's her name? Dr. Her son was in that.
Is it Dr. Lang? Is that right?
No, her name is her son was in that group Sugarland or Sugar.
Oh, I have.
What's her name?
Idea.
I want to say it starts with a B. Anyway, I went down and I talked to her, and she's head of the education department. And she asked me. She said, "Is teaching your passion? Is that what you're passionate about?" And I said, or calling. She goes, "Is that your calling? Is it your calling to be a teacher?" And I said, "Well, I wouldn't say it's my calling." I said, "I just think it would be really cool to teach history in high school." And she goes, "You're probably in the wrong department." And she said, She goes, "What do you do now?" And I told her that I was, pastor of a church and all this. And she said, "Yeah, you need to go up to Henderson and third floor and see them." And so that's the person that was taking me around, student that took me up there. And that's when I met Dr. Garner's grading papers. It was finals. It was in May. And I'd already finished up at Walter State. And so I was done at Walter State, and I was visiting over there, and Carson Newman was just finishing up. And so that's when I met Dr. Garner and told him my story, and he goes, "Yeah, you need to be in here." He goes, "You need to be a religion major." And then Brummett walked by, was going to Taco Bell, and stuck his head in. He said, "Don, I'm going to Taco Bell. Do you want anything?" And he goes, "No, I'm good." And Garner was sitting in the conference room with his feet up on the table grading papers, and he said, "Ross, have you got, how many students are you advising right now?" And Brummett goes, I don't know, 8 or 10. And he said, "Can you take one more?" And Ross goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, this is Lee Fox." And so I met Ross, and so Ross was mine. So anyway, I went to Carson Newman for I went a year and a year and a half, and it was my last. I had one more semester, a summer, and then a semester, and I was doing my final, whatever you call it, your audit to make sure you're going to graduate and everything.
Right, your degree plan.
Yeah. And so I was sitting there in Brummett's office, and he said, he was looking at everything. He goes, he said, if you take 2 or 3 more classes this summer, he said, you could graduate with a double major, religion and history. And I said, well, can we make that work? I said, because I want to graduate in May. And he goes, yeah, let me see. So we did some stuff there. And he goes, yeah, if you do this. So I took either 9 or 12 hours that summer. That little house that's down there where Baumgartner's office was, the little house behind Stokely, where the history, I think Van Landingham's in there. And
do you mean the shack?
Yeah, the little tiny house where there's little offices. And
the one that's behind the cafeteria?
Yeah.
Yeah, the shack.
Yeah. I spent one whole summer in there. And I took Baumgartner and Moffitt and Van Landingham, and I took either 4 or 5 history classes to get me up to speed, so that then I could just kind of. And I graduated from Carson Newman with a major, a bachelor's in history and a bachelor's in religion, and I graduated in 2007, and that was all I was going to do. I was just going to go to Carson Newman. That's it. And but I met Crutchley and those guys, and they're like, you need to go in seminary.
Okay,
So
there's this big, huge plaque from Baylor hanging up on your wall.
Yeah,
so you can't. You didn't stop.
No, I didn't. And so in May of 2007, they told me, they said, you need to go down and visit Truett Seminary. And so I wasn't going to go. And then one of the professors, it wasn't really the money. It wasn't the money of flying down there and visiting. But I had one of the professors, I don't even remember who it was, said, I will pay for your plane ticket down there and back if you'll go. And I'm like, you don't have to do that, but I'll go. So Rob and I went to Truett, fell in love with Waco, fell in love with Baylor, fell in love with Truett. And so I started there in fall of 2007. And Robin, my wife Robin, who already had her undergrad at UT in accounting, decided to go to seminary with me. So she and I both went to seminary at the same time together, both graduated with our MDivs in December of 2010.
I did not know Robin went with you.
She has her MDiv, yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and actually Robin, I will say this, in my own defense, I'm not bragging or anything, but I was a lot better student at 44 than I was at 19. And but Robin we had to quit taking classes together because at this point I had learned how to manage school, and so we were pretty competitive. We're both really competitive, so we took our first few classes together, and we finally decided it'd probably be best if we weren't in the same class together, and so we kind of started not taking. We had to take a lot of the same things, but we would take different professors. And we still had a class or two together, but after our first probably 2 semesters, we didn't take much together after that.
Better for the marriage.
Better for the marriage. Yeah, when you're living in an apartment in Waco, Texas, you want to keep things as cool as you can keep them.
I made a 96 on this paper. Yeah, well, I made
that's
a 97.
exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. And so yeah, and I graduated. We both graduated in 2010 with our masters, and now I am almost 1 year done with my doctorate. So
you're still not done.
I'm still not done. I'm getting my doctorate at Baptist Theological Seminary at Richmond, and I am about to finish my first chapter in my final project.
Your dissertation?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So
on Celtic spirituality in thin places. So.
Wow, that's neat.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so I'm gonna switch gears on you.
Okay.
Because we've talked a lot. So I kind of want to wrap up by asking you some questions. Because you are a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to people talk all the time.
Right.
So are there things in your lifetime, have you found things about when people talk that irk you? Are there things that annoy you in any way? Or that make you cringe?
As far as how they say things,
Or it can be what they say.
I don't have a lot of tolerance for people who have, like, who's speaking in a condescending tone. That kind of irks me. People who pet peeves, okay. People who correct you all the time.
May I? That kind of thing?
Yeah, or, sometimes, if you use a word, if you use a word incorrectly, people that will stop you and say, will tell you the right way to say the word. And I've got now where if I know that's something that bothers someone, I'll intentionally, because I'm that guy, But it's just, I enjoy dialects. I enjoy, my favorite dialect is Irish. I've worked with a couple of Irish people that I love the way that they talk, their dialect. When I was on staff at First Baptist Washington D.C., I got a lot of correction with the way that I talked. I can't help my dialect. I can't help that I say words odd sometimes, that it comes out as odd. And when you stand in the pulpit of the First Baptist Church of the city of Washington, D.C., as they say, they are used to a very intellectual voice from the pulpit. I come off as being very folksy. And some people like that. And I had some people who would come by my office and want to give me lessons in linguistics, of how to pronounce words correctly, and to help me to be better understood. You gotta remember, First Baptist Church of the City of Washington, D.C. Is I love that church. I have a deep love for that church, but it is a very highbrow church. And you sit in a deacons meeting or any committee meeting, and you have former chiefs of staff, and you have people who have walked the halls of the House of Representatives and Senate building and White House, and so they're very good people, but they also have high expectations of their staff members and their the way that they're perceived in the community. So I know that when on the Sundays when I would preach, which wasn't a lot, but every couple of months I would preach, I know that there were some people who would cringe because I would have to, and then it made me also a little paranoid.
Did it make you feel small?
Yeah. But then and most of the time I had more education than some of them. I had masters, and some of them had a bachelor's. And but what would always make it okay would be like when we always left the pulpit, and the ministers processed out, very high church, very Episcopal almost. We would process out, we robed and stoled, and everything full bells and smells, Baptist church, and the choir, men on this side, women on this side, split choir, and then they would process out behind us and all that. Well, then we would go out and stand, and as people would leave, we would line up, and as people would leave, we would shake their hands. And almost to every time that I preached, there would always be someone there from Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia, and they would go, "Gosh, I love your accent. So good to hear your accent." So that would always make me feel good. It's like, "Oh, I love your accent." And most of the time, it's African American ladies that would go, "Child, don't lose that accent." they go, "Don't lose that accent." I'm like, "Gotcha." But
meanwhile, the white guys that are sitting in the deacon meeting with you are
like, "Lee, you can't, life sounds like love, and love sounds like life, and you run your words together, and you can't say ain't, and I didn't from the pulpit, but that would be like, slow down when you talk. I have a tendency to, when I start, you've heard me, when I start preaching, I have a certain cadence that I fall into. Here, I'm fairly easy to understand.
Have you heard have people come here and said things to you?
No, nobody said anything here.
I would be shocked.
No, nobody here. But if I preach, and I preach quite a bit in the North, and that is one of the main things that they will say. They say, "Man, you have a thick accent," and okay, I've been here for almost 3 years now. Went back to D.C. A few months ago. Well, in January, and I hadn't seen my friends there in over a year, and we were sitting and we'd all gotten together and we were talking, and they were all just like, we'd been talking for like 15 or 20 minutes, and they were just all smiling. I'm like, what is wrong with you? And these are all folks that I dearly love, and they're all like your age. They're all millennials to down into the 20s, and they were like, your accent, man. They're like, your accent is so much thicker now than it was.
I was about to say,
because I'd been there 3 years. I'd been there 3 years, and I had kind of gotten used, because then I'd come here, and everybody was like, "Why are you talking like that?" My family would be like, "What's wrong with you?" They're like, "You're kind of being uppity," So
you'd adopted some of the things that they complained about. I had learned
to pronounce my words and to be aware of how I phrased things and didn't like cut words off, because that's what I had a bad habit of doing, would be cut words off, cut them off short, not say the D, not say the S, not say those things, and so I had gotten used to making sure I hit that last syllable when I would speak. Like, instead of saying speak, I'd say speak. So I got used to pronouncing that last syllable or that last letter instead of just like running over it. And up there, in D.C., it sounds fine. Here, it sounds like you're coming off as being, condescending or like high and mighty, as they say here. So,
do you still sometimes catch yourself doing those old things that they made you do in D.C.?
Yeah. Even when I'm preaching, sometimes I will say a sentence and I will go back and say it again, and a lot of people think it might be for emphasis, but it's because I feel like I didn't pronounce the words correctly or clearly. And so I will go back and I will say that sentence again. So now you'll be thinking about that when you hear me preach. But
you're right.
Yeah. That is the I won't tell. And in DC, it was very ethnically diverse. So I was preaching to. At First Baptist, we had people from Sudan. We had people from Ethiopia. We had people from Colombia, from Guatemala, from the Middle East, and so they were the ones that struggled the most with my accent. The people that had lived most of their life, Virginia, let's say, or even Southern Maryland. It wasn't so hard for them to pick up on my accent.
It wasn't because they couldn't understand you.
No, it was because they wanted me to be like them. And there's a young lady who I'm still friends with. She's from Bogota, and she came to me. She'd been coming to church there. She was invited by a friend, and she was coming to church there. And after about, a couple of months, we were all out having dinner one night, and she sat down beside me, and she goes, and I can't do her Colombian accent. She has this thick Colombian accent. She goes, "Lee," she goes, "I don't understand you." She said, "Life, love, life. It all sounds the same to me." So I had to. That taught me that I can't, because if I went back and listened to myself on, because they recorded everything. I'm like, it does sound the same. Life and love. When I say it, if I don't think about what I'm saying, life and love sounds sounds a lot alike. That's even right. When I'm just talking. Now, if I think about it, I can say love or life. But if I say love life, love life, love life, love love, love life, to someone with Hispanic ears, that sounds the same. Like this, she said, it sounds exactly like the same word. And she goes, I don't know which one you're saying. So,
and it matters.
It does matter. That's what she was saying. She's like, that's what she was saying. It's like, for me to understand, to grasp the content of the sermon, I need to know what you're saying. So she always had a friend of mine from North Carolina who'd lived in D.C. for 15 years, but he understood very well an East Tennessee accent. So she would sit with him, and like if she didn't understand a word,
what'd he say?
What'd he say? Yeah, and he would tell her, and she'd be, oh, okay. And so, like I said, we're still friends today, and but that was the interesting part of it. But here, interestingly enough, if I go to Wares Valley in Sevier County or Cosby or somewhere like that and preach, I come off as sounding uppity. Because
really?
I don't have that. I can drop down, not drop down as in lesser than, but drop down into a very country cadence if I want to. I can preach and talk as country as anybody, but I try not to because that's not my normal place to preach. But if I'm asked to preach in a friend's church or something, they think that I'm from the city, and it's just it's weird how 25 miles can make such a difference in East Tennessee. If you go 25 miles north, south, east, or west, most spots you will change dialects 2 or 3 times in that like 25 or 30 mile radius. Because I've got friends who you probably couldn't even understand that have such a country. I mean, they use words, like, okay, for instance, I've got a friend, and this is my favorite phrases, and I tell this phrase to people all the time. It's like, if I ask you, Tori, do you want to go, or you ask me, you say, hey, Lee, do you want to go to Aubrey's to eat, or do you want to go to Chesapeake's to eat? If it doesn't matter to me where we go to eat, I might say, I don't know, it don't make me no never mind. You ever heard that phrase?
Yeah.
And I've got people, I say it jokingly, but I have friends who that's the way they talk. I don't know, it don't make me no never mind. If I had my druthers, you ever heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If I had my druthers, I'd rather go to Aubrey's, but, don't make me no never mind. So, that's how I grew up. Now, my grandmother on my dad's side had her PhD in English from UT, and she was a high school teacher and a principal at Sevier County High School. My dad had the best penmanship of anybody in our family, and I picked that up from my dad. I have good penmanship. My dad taught us that it was important to have good penmanship. My dad's penmanship was impeccable. My dad only had a high school education. But my dad always said, and he would never let us, if you've seen anybody write their name, use scribble, my dad would not allow that. It's like you were given a name, you write your name. So anyway, that's kind of how I grew up. And it was an odd mix of my grandmother's, who I never knew, academic influence coupled with the good old boys, way of talking and stuff like that. So it was a weird mix. My sister talks very proper. My brother talks more like just good old boy language.
So are you in the middle?
Yeah, I'm probably in the middle more than anything. They think I'm not, but my sister talks more proper than I do. And we all, my sister, my brother and sister and I, we all have college educations. But my sister's in social work, and my brother in criminal justice.
Okay.
So.
Well, all right. I appreciate.
Probably told you more than you needed to know.
No, this has been absolutely wonderful. Last thing, if you'll just read all the words on this page, you don't have to stop between list 1 and list 2, and you can go in order. I would prefer that, but take your time, go as slow or fast as you like.
I've done this before.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Have you done it for a study like this? Or?
No, I did it in a preaching class. They have you say these words so that because when you project, you can say these words without. I won't do it that way. I'm gonna say it how I say it, so I can say them.
Say them however you want to say them.
Okay, that's funny though because we have done this. Okay, fill, pin, oil, hollow, fish bait, wash, help, feel, potato, life, pin, thorough, feel, follow, get, red, old lace, fire, fail, home, hit, wire, feet, doing, okra, greasy, mining, tobacco, fell, lice. Lot, thought, prize, bull, poor, pin, choice, toll, ball, pour, trap, dress, cub, thing, fault, test, hand, nothing, this, morning, often, trimmed, class, cost, risk, story, ask, toe, fault, grasp.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do you have any more questions for me?
No.
Hope you had fun.
I did. Thank you.
Good.